The text came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right in the middle of our family group chat where we were planning Mom's 70th birthday party. Simple words, no dramatic punctuation, just raw cruelty delivered with the casual efficiency that only family can manage. Stop pretending you're some war hero, Vanessa. We all know you're a fake veteran. Then came the follow-up that made my blood freeze. Real veterans don't hide behind made-up trauma stories for attention. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My brother Tyler had just accused me of stolen valor in front of our entire extended family, 17 people in that chat, including our parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. All of them now staring at their phones, wondering if the woman they'd known for 34 years had been lying about the 3 years she'd spent in the army, the deployment to Iraq, the injuries that ended her military career, and the purple heart that sat in a shadow box on her mantelpiece. I stared at my phone in my apartment in Millbrook Heights, my service dog Rex sensing my distress and moving closer to my wheelchair. The shrapnel in my left leg throbbed. It always did when I was stressed, a constant reminder of the IED that had changed everything on a dusty road outside Baghdad 7 years ago. But before I tell you about that night, about the medical records I'd never had to show anyone, about the x-rays that looked like a constellation of metal fragments, about the purple heart that Tyler apparently thought was a prop from a costume shop, let me tell you how we got here. Because the real story isn't what happened in that group chat. It's what led my own brother to believe I was capable of such an unthinkable deception. Tyler James Holloway was born 18 months after me, which meant we grew up close but competitive. Where I was quiet and studious, he was loud and charismatic. Where I preferred books, he preferred crowds. Where I planned carefully, he lived impulsively. Our parents, Richard and Linda Holloway, ran a small accounting firm in Rosemount Valley. They were good people, practical, hardworking, supportive of both their children's dreams, even when those dreams seemed impossible. When I announced at 19 that I was enlisting in the Army, they were surprised, but proud. Tyler's reaction was different. "You're seriously going to waste your college scholarship to play soldier?" he asked over dinner at Marcello's Italian restaurant where we'd gone to celebrate my decision. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "I'm not playing anything, Tyler. I want to serve my country." "You want to run away from real life, you mean? College too hard for you?" My parents shut him down immediately, but the seed was planted. In Tyler's mind, my military service wasn't about duty or patriotism. It was about avoidance, about choosing the easy path instead of the challenging one. He was working on his business degree at Thornwood University then, planning to take over the family accounting firm someday. Everything mapped out, everything predictable, everything safe. My choice to enlist disrupted his narrative of how life was supposed to work. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But I thrived. I discovered I was good at logistics, at problem solving under pressure, at leading teams through complex challenges. I earned my rank quickly, made friends who became sisters, and found a sense of purpose I'd never experienced in civilian life. Tyler visited me once during my first year of service, when I was stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. He spent the entire weekend complaining about the heat, the early morning reveille, the unnecessary military protocols. "You don't get why you like this place," he said as we walked past the barracks where I lived. "It's like summer camp for adults who can't handle the real world." "It is the real world, Tyler. We train here so we can deploy overseas and actually make a difference." "Deploy overseas?" He stopped walking. "Vanessa, you're not actually thinking of volunteering for combat, are you?" "I'm thinking of doing whatever my country asks me to do." He shook his head like I was a child who didn't understand the consequences of her actions. "This military fantasy is going to end eventually. When it does, you'll come back to Rosemount Valley and realize you wasted years of your life." But it wasn't a fantasy. It was my career, my calling, my identity. And when my unit got deployment orders for Iraq in 2016, I was ready. The deployment was everything I'd trained for, and nothing I could have prepared for. We were based at Camp Defender, about 60 miles north of Baghdad, running supply convoys to forward operating bases throughout the region. It was dangerous work, but essential work. Soldiers needed ammunition, food, medical supplies, equipment. We made sure they got what they needed to complete their missions and come home alive. I wrote letters home regularly, sharing what I could about our operations, the Iraqi people I met, the sense of purpose that came from knowing our work mattered. My parents wrote back with news from Rosemount Valley, updates about the family business, questions about my safety and well-being. Tyler's letters were different. When he wrote at all, which wasn't often, his messages were short and dismissive. Hope you're staying safe over there. Mom's worried sick, of course. Still think you should have stayed in college, but what do I know? Dad says you got promoted. Congrats, I guess. Try not to let all that authority go to your head. When are you coming home? This whole Middle East adventure has gone on long enough. Adventure. That's what he called it. Like I was backpacking through Europe instead of serving in a combat zone.
The worst part was how he talked about my service when I wasn't around to defend it. I found out later, through our cousin Emma, that Tyler had been telling people I joined the Army because I couldn't hack it in college and was looking for easy money and benefits. He said you're basically getting a paid vacation in the desert, Emma told me during one of our Skype calls. I told him he was being ridiculous, but he seemed pretty convinced that military service isn't real work. A paid vacation. That's how my brother described 12-hour shifts in 120-degree heat, convoy runs through territory where insurgents regularly planted roadside bombs, and the constant stress of knowing that any day could be your last. I tried to set the record straight in my letters home, sharing stories about our missions, the Iraqi families we helped, the schools we protected, the infrastructure we supported. I wanted my family to understand that we weren't tourists. We were professionals doing critical work in a dangerous environment. My parents got it. They shared my letters with their friends, spoke proudly of my service at church, sent care packages filled with items I'd requested for the local children we encountered. Tyler's response to my stories was predictable. Sounds like you're really drinking the military Kool-Aid over there. Everything changed on November 15th, 2016. We were running a routine supply convoy from Camp Defender to Forward Operating Base Phoenix, a journey we'd made dozens of times before. I was the convoy commander, responsible for 5 vehicles and 22 soldiers. The road was one we knew well, through terrain we'd traveled safely many times before. The IED was buried under a pothole that had been there for weeks. Someone had filled it with explosives sometime during the night, turning a familiar road hazard into a deadly trap. The blast hit my vehicle, the lead Humvee, at 08:47 hours. I remember the flash of light, the deafening sound, the sensation of flying through the air, then nothing. I woke up 3 days later at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. The doctors explained that I'd suffered a traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures in my left leg, and extensive shrapnel wounds from the vehicle's destroyed armor plating. The shrapnel was the worst part. Dozens of metal fragments had embedded in my leg, my hip, my lower back. Some pieces were too close to nerves and blood vessels to remove safely. They would stay with me forever, a permanent reminder of that morning on the road to Phoenix. 2 of my soldiers had been killed in the blast, Specialist Rodriguez and Private First Class Kim, both barely 20 years old, both with families waiting for them back home. 3 others were wounded, though less severely than I was. I spent 6 weeks at Landstuhl, then another 8 weeks at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological counseling, medical evaluations, learning to walk again with a leg full of metal, learning to manage chronic pain, learning to live with the survivor's guilt that comes from being the commander who brought her soldiers into harm's way. My parents flew out to visit me at Walter Reed. They spent a week by my side, helping with my care, meeting with doctors, learning about my long-term prognosis. They saw the x-rays that looked like someone had scattered ball bearings throughout my leg. They heard the doctors explain that I would need ongoing medical care for the rest of my life. They understood that my military career was over and that my civilian life would be forever changed. Tyler didn't visit. He was too busy with finals to make the trip. When I was medically retired from the Army in early 2017, the ceremony was small but meaningful. My commanding officer presented me with the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, along with the Army Commendation Medal and the Combat Action Badge. My parents were there, tears streaming down their faces as they watched their daughter being honored for her sacrifice. Tyler was in Cancun with his college friends for spring break. He posted photos of himself on the beach while I was receiving military honors for nearly dying in service to my country. The transition to civilian life was harder than anything I'd experienced in the Army. Chronic pain, PTSD, the challenge of finding employment as a disabled veteran, the simple daily struggle of navigating the world in a wheelchair when buildings weren't designed for people like me. I moved to Millbrook Heights, about 2 hours from my family, where the VA Medical Center offered the specialized care I needed. I got Rex, a service dog trained to help with my mobility issues and PTSD symptoms. I started college, using my GI Bill benefits to study social work so I could help other veterans navigate the transition I was struggling with myself. Tyler visited my new apartment once, about 6 months after I moved in. He spent the entire time complaining about how depressing everything was. "This whole setup is pretty dramatic, don't you think?" he said, gesturing at my wheelchair, my medical equipment, the shadow box containing my Purple Heart and other military decorations. "Are you sure you need all this stuff?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you seem fine to me. You're talking normally, you're thinking clearly. How disabled can you really be?" I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "Tyler, I have 43 pieces of shrapnel permanently embedded in my body. I have chronic pain, PTSD, and a traumatic brain injury. I can't walk without assistance. I need a service dog to function independently. What part of that seems fake to you?" "I'm not saying it's fake," he backtracked quickly. "I'm just saying maybe you're playing it up a little for the benefits." That was the beginning of the end for our relationship. Over the next few years, Tyler's skepticism about my injuries became a constant undercurrent in our family interactions. He never said anything directly in front of our parents, but his comments were always there, subtle but cutting.
"Vanessa's having another episode," he'd say when I had to cancel family plans due to a PTSD flare-up. "The VA must be paying really well these days," he'd comment when I bought a new piece of adaptive equipment for my apartment. "Some people really know how to milk the system," he'd mutter when I mentioned my disability compensation. My parents noticed the tension but didn't understand the depth of Tyler's suspicion. To them, I was their wounded warrior daughter who had sacrificed her health and her future for her country. To Tyler, I was increasingly becoming someone who was exaggerating her problems for attention and financial gain. The breaking point came last month, during our family's annual reunion at Lakeside Resort in Pine Valley. 3 days of extended family activities, games, shared meals, and the kind of forced togetherness that either brings families closer or tears them apart. I'd been having a rough week. The weather change had aggravated my chronic pain, and I'd been dealing with some PTSD symptoms related to the anniversary of the IED attack. I was managing, but it was taking effort. Tyler seemed to interpret my struggles as performance art. "You know, Vanessa," he said during the family barbecue on Saturday night, "it's interesting how your symptoms always seem to get worse when there's an audience." I was sitting by the fire pit, Rex at my side, trying to enjoy the evening despite the constant ache in my leg. Several cousins were nearby, chatting and roasting marshmallows. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nothing, just an observation." But he didn't stop there. He continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, about how some people use military service as an identity when they don't really have anything else going for them. The conversation around the fire pit quieted. People were starting to pay attention. Tyler, our cousin Emma warned, that's enough. I'm just saying it's convenient how some people can't seem to move past their military experience, especially when it comes with monthly checks and sympathy points. I felt my heart rate spike. Rex immediately moved closer, sensing my distress. Are you talking about me specifically, or are you just making general observations about veterans? Tyler shrugged. If the boot fits. That's when I realized he wasn't just skeptical about my injuries. He genuinely believed I was lying about my entire military experience. In his mind, I hadn't just exaggerated my disabilities, I'd fabricated my service, my deployment, my combat experience. Everything. I left the reunion early the next morning, too angry and hurt to stay for the final day's activities. My parents were confused and upset, but I couldn't explain Tyler's behavior without creating a family crisis that would overshadow everything else. Instead, I drove home to Millbrook Heights and tried to process what had happened. My own brother thought I was a fraud, not just disabled in ways he couldn't see, but actually pretending to be a veteran for personal gain. The thought was so absurd, so hurtful, so completely disconnected from reality that I didn't know how to respond to it. So when Mom's 70th birthday came up 2 weeks later, I thought I could just focus on celebrating her and ignore Tyler's ongoing suspicions. We were planning a surprise party, coordinating gifts, arranging for relatives to travel to Rosemount Valley for the celebration. I suggested we create a group chat to make planning easier. Everyone joined. Mom and Dad, Tyler and his wife Jennifer, our aunts Carol and Patricia, our uncles Frank and David, our cousins Emma, Michael, and Rachel, plus a few family friends who were helping with the arrangements. For a few days, it worked perfectly. We shared ideas for decorations, coordinated the catering, planned the timeline for the surprise. It felt like normal family communication, the kind of group effort that makes celebrations special. Then Tuesday night happened. I had suggested that we create a photo display for the party, including pictures from different decades of Mom's life. I offered to contribute some photos from my military service, including a picture of me in uniform that Mom had always loved. That's when Tyler struck. Stop pretending you're some war hero, Vanessa. We all know you're a fake veteran. Followed immediately by, real veterans don't hide behind made-up trauma stories for attention. The group chat went silent. 17 people had just watched my brother accuse me of stolen valor, one of the most serious accusations you can make against someone who claims military service. I sat in my wheelchair, staring at my phone, feeling the familiar ache in my leg where 43 pieces of shrapnel serve as permanent proof of my service. I looked across my apartment at the shadow box containing my Purple Heart, my combat action badge, my Army Commendation Medal, my medical retirement paperwork, and the folded flag that had been presented to me by my commanding officer. In my filing cabinet were hundreds of pages of medical records documenting every piece of metal in my body, every surgery, every treatment, every therapy session. X-rays that showed the constellation of fragments embedded in my bones and soft tissue. VA disability ratings that confirmed the extent of my service-connected injuries. On my computer were thousands of photos from my deployment, pictures of my unit, our missions, the Iraqi families we'd helped, the forward operating bases we supplied, email conversations with fellow veterans who'd served alongside me, social media connections with soldiers who'd been in the convoy the day I was wounded. In my phone were contact numbers for the doctors who'd treated me, the commanding officers who'd served with me, the VA counselors who'd helped me transition to civilian life, the Purple Heart organization that had welcomed me as a member. I had more proof of my military service than most veterans ever need to provide. Documentation that could verify every day of my enlistment, every mission I'd completed, every injury I'd sustained, every medal I'd earned.
But I'd never had to prove any of it to my own family. Until now. Tyler had just forced me to choose between defending my honor and maintaining family peace.
He'd put me in a position where silence would be interpreted as admission of guilt, but speaking up would mean exposing him as someone who'd publicly accused his disabled veteran sister of stolen valor. I looked at Rex, who was watching me with the kind of intelligent concern that service dogs develop for their handlers. He knew I was upset. He could sense the decision forming in my mind. For 7 years, I'd been patient with Tyler's skepticism. I'd ignored his comments about my disabilities, his suggestions that I was exaggerating my problems, his insinuations that I was milking the system. I'd protected him from the consequences of his ignorance because I didn't want to cause family drama. But stolen valor wasn't ignorance. It was accusation. It was character assassination. It was claiming that I had dishonored every veteran who had actually served by pretending to be something I wasn't. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. I took a screenshot of Tyler's messages, then opened the filing cabinet where I kept my military records. I pulled out my medical files, my x-rays, my discharge paperwork, my award citations. Then I picked up my phone and began typing the response that would change everything. Because if Tyler wanted proof that I was a real veteran, I was about to give him more proof than he'd bargained for. And once that proof went public in our family group chat, there would be no taking it back, no protecting him from the consequences of his accusations, and no pretending that what he'd said was just a misunderstanding between siblings. Some battles you can avoid. Others, you have to fight to survive. Tyler had just started a war he couldn't win. I didn't respond to Tyler's accusation immediately. I didn't fire back with angry words or defensive explanations. I didn't even acknowledge his messages right away. Instead, I did something I'd learned in the Army. I gathered my evidence, planned my strategy, and prepared to execute a response that would be so thorough, so documented, and so undeniable that it would end this conversation permanently. The group chat remained silent for 23 minutes after Tyler's accusation. 17 people staring at their phones, waiting to see how I would handle being called a fake veteran by my own brother in front of our entire extended family. While they waited, I methodically photographed every piece of documentation that proved my military service. First, I pulled out my DD-214, the official discharge paperwork that every veteran receives when they leave the military. It detailed every aspect of my service: dates of enlistment and discharge, units served in, deployments completed, awards received, reason for separation. Under character of discharge, it clearly stated medical, honorable. I photographed every page. Next came my Purple Heart certificate, signed by the Secretary of the Army, with the official seal and my full name, rank, and unit designation. The citation read, "For wounds received in action against an enemy of the United States while serving with the 47th Transportation Company during Operation Iraqi Freedom on 15 November 2016. I photographed that too. Then I pulled out my medical records. Hundreds of pages documenting my injuries, my treatments, my surgeries, my ongoing care. But the most important pages were the x-rays from Walter Reed, the ones that showed exactly what Tyler claimed didn't exist. I laid them out on my kitchen table and photographed each one clearly. The images were stark, unmistakable. Dozens of bright white fragments scattered throughout my left leg, hip, and lower back like stars in a night sky. Shrapnel from the IED blast permanently embedded in my body, creating the chronic pain that Tyler insisted was performance art. But I wasn't done. I photographed my VA disability rating paperwork showing my 70% service-connected disability rating for the traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, and PTSD resulting from my combat injuries. I photographed my Army Commendation Medal citation, awarded for exceptionally meritorious service during combat operations in Iraq. I photographed my Combat Action Badge certificate, given only to soldiers who have engaged in ground combat. I photographed pages from my deployment records, showing the dates I served at Camp Defender, the missions I commanded, the soldiers under my leadership. I even photographed Rex's service dog certification papers, which specifically listed combat-related PTSD and mobility assistance for combat injuries as his trained functions. 27 photographs in total. Each one a piece of an unassailable puzzle that proved not just that I was a real veteran, but that I was a combat veteran who had been wounded in action and medically retired with full honors. While I was documenting my evidence, my phone buzzed with private messages from family members who were clearly uncomfortable with Tyler's public accusation. Emma texted, "Vanessa, I'm so sorry. Tyler is way out of line. Everyone knows you served." My Aunt Carol wrote, "Honey, don't let him get to you. We all know what you've been through." My cousin Michael sent, "This is insane. I was at your retirement ceremony. What is Tyler thinking?" But the most important message came from someone I hadn't expected. Tyler's wife, Jennifer. "Vanessa, I am mortified. Tyler has been saying these things privately for months, and I keep telling him he's wrong, but he won't listen. I don't know where this is coming from. Please know that not everyone thinks this way." Months. Tyler had been spreading this poison for months, questioning my service to anyone who would listen, building his case against me in private conversations, while I thought we were just dealing with typical sibling tensions. That's when I realized this wasn't an impulsive accusation born from a moment of anger. This was a calculated campaign to discredit me, based on Tyler's belief that I was somehow deceiving our entire family for personal gain.
He wasn't going to back down from a simple denial or a defensive response. He'd already made up his mind. The only thing that would stop him was evidence so overwhelming that continuing his accusations would make him look not just wrong, but delusional. So, I gave him exactly that. At 12:34 a.m., I posted my response to the family group chat. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't defend my character or argue my case. I just posted one sentence, followed by 27 photographs. Since my service has been questioned, here is the documentation. The first photo was my DD-214. Clear, official, undeniable proof of my honorable discharge from the United States Army after 3 years and 2 months of service, including 1 combat deployment to Iraq. The second photo was my Purple Heart certificate, with its official seal and formal citation for wounds received in action. The third through eighth photos were the X-ray images, showing the constellation of shrapnel fragments embedded throughout my body. Each X-ray was labeled with the date, the medical facility, and my identifying information. Photos 9 through 15 were pages from my medical records, documenting the extent of my injuries, the surgeries I'd undergone, the ongoing treatments I required. Photos 16 through 20 were my military awards and citations, each one detailing specific acts of service and leadership during my deployment. Photo 21 was my VA disability rating, showing my 70% service-connected rating for combat-related injuries. Photos 22 through 25 were deployment photos, me in uniform at Camp Defender, with my unit, on convoy operations, receiving my combat action badge. Photo 26 was Rex's service dog certification, specifically noting his training for combat-related PTSD and mobility assistance. Photo 27 was a group photo from my medical retirement ceremony, showing me receiving my folded flag and final honors from my commanding officer while my parents watched with tears in their eyes. I posted all 27 images in rapid succession, then typed one final message. Anyone who would like to verify this documentation can contact the VA, the Army Personnel Command, or Walter Reed Medical Center. My service record is a matter of public record. My medical records are protected by HIPAA, which is why I've never shared them before tonight. I hope this clears up any confusion about my military service. Then, I turned off my phone and went to bed. I woke up 6 hours later to 247 unread messages.
The family group chat had exploded, not with support for Tyler's accusation, but with shock, horror, and outrage that he had forced me to publicly display the most private, painful documentation of my military service and combat injuries. My Aunt Carol had written, "Tyler James Holloway, I am ashamed of you. Your sister nearly died serving her country, and you forced her to prove it to her own family? Apologize immediately." My Uncle Frank posted, "I've seen a lot of things in my 68 years, but I've never seen a man accuse his own sister of lying about being wounded in combat. This is disgraceful." My cousin Emma wrote, "Those x-rays. Vanessa, I had no idea how badly you were hurt. Tyler, what is wrong with you?" My cousin Michael added, "I feel sick looking at these photos, not because of Vanessa's injuries, but because she had to share them to prove her service to her own brother." But the most devastating response came from someone unexpected. Our father. "Tyler, your sister has 43 pieces of shrapnel in her body from an IED that killed 2 of her soldiers. She spent 14 weeks in military hospitals learning to walk again. She receives ongoing medical care for injuries that will affect her for the rest of her life. She was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. And you accused her of being a fake veteran in front of her entire family? I don't understand how my son could be so cruel to a sister, and I don't understand how I failed to raise you better than this." Tyler had tried to respond several times during the night, but each attempt had been weaker than the last. First, "I didn't mean she was lying about everything, just that maybe she was exaggerating some things." Then, "I was just asking questions. People fake military service all the time." Finally, this got out of hand. I didn't think she'd make such a big deal about it. But by morning, it was clear that Tyler's accusations had backfired spectacularly. Instead of exposing me as a fraud, he had exposed himself as someone so disconnected from reality that he could look at his disabled veteran sister and see deception instead of sacrifice. The evidence I'd provided wasn't just overwhelming, it was heartbreaking. Family members who had known about my service but not the full extent of my injuries were seeing for the first time exactly what I'd endured. The x-rays that looked like someone had scattered metal confetti throughout my body. The medical reports detailing chronic pain, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury. The VA disability ratings that confirmed the permanent nature of my injuries. More importantly, they were seeing that I had never asked for sympathy or special treatment. I had never shared these images before. I had never used my injuries for attention or advantage. I had lived quietly with the consequences of my service, managing my disabilities with dignity, while Tyler built his conspiracy theory about my supposed deception. But the real moment of reckoning came from my mother when she finally spoke up in the group chat. "Tyler, I need you to understand something. When your sister was in the hospital in Germany, unconscious for 3 days, not knowing if she would live or die, you were on spring break in Cancun, posting pictures of yourself on the beach. When she was learning to walk again at Walter Reed, you were too busy with finals to visit. When she received her Purple Heart, you couldn't be bothered to attend the ceremony."
But now you want to question whether her service was real? Now you want to accuse her of lying about nearly dying for her country? Your sister has never asked this family for anything except basic respect for her service, and you couldn't even give her that. I am ashamed that I raised a son who could be so heartless to his sister. The group chat went silent after that. Not the uncomfortable silence that had followed Tyler's initial accusation, but the heavy, final silence that comes when someone has revealed something about their character that can't be taken back or explained away. Tyler had accused his disabled veteran sister of stolen valor in front of 17 family members. When she provided overwhelming documentation of her service and injuries, he had tried to minimize his accusation as just asking questions and complained that she was making a big deal out of being called a fake veteran. He had shown everyone exactly who he was, and they had all seen it clearly.
But what Tyler didn't understand yet was that this wasn't just about our family anymore. Because while he was trying to backtrack and minimize his accusations in our private group chat, something else was happening that would take this far beyond Rosemount Valley. My cousin Michael, who was a social media manager for a veterans nonprofit organization, had been so outraged by Tyler's behavior that he'd screenshotted the key messages and shared them with his network of veteran advocates. Not to shame our family publicly, but to show his colleagues an example of the kind of skepticism and disrespect that veterans sometimes face from their own families. This is why we need better education about veteran issues, he'd written in his post. When a Purple Heart recipient has to prove her service to her own brother, we have a serious problem. The post was shared by 3 veteran advocacy groups, then by a military spouse network, then by a Gold Star family organization, then by a major veteran influencer with 100,000 followers. By Wednesday morning, #ProveYourService was trending on social media, with thousands of veterans sharing their own stories of having their service questioned by family members, employers, or strangers. My story, the disabled veteran forced to show her shrapnel x-rays to prove her service to her own brother, became the centerpiece of a national conversation about stolen valor accusations, veteran skepticism, and the burden of proof that legitimate veterans sometimes face. And Tyler, who had thought he was just settling a family argument, was about to discover that his accusations had consequences far beyond our group chat. Because while I had been quietly managing my disabilities and building my civilian life, I had also been quietly building relationships within the veteran community. Relationships with people who understood exactly what Tyler's accusations meant and who weren't going to let them stand unchallenged. People who had platforms, influence, and the ability to make sure that everyone understood the difference between a real veteran and someone who questions real veterans without evidence. Tyler had wanted to expose me as a fake. Instead, he was about to be exposed as something much worse. Someone who had committed character assassination against his own disabled veteran sister based on nothing more than his own ignorance and suspicion. And this time, I wasn't going to protect him from the consequences of his choices. The first phone call came at 6:22 a.m. Thursday morning. I was still in bed, Rex curled up beside me, when an unknown number lit up my phone screen. Ms. Holloway, this is Jake Morrison from Veterans Today podcast. I hope I'm not calling too early, but we've been following your story on social media, and we'd love to have you on the show to discuss stolen valor accusations and family dynamics. I sat up slowly, my leg aching, as always in the morning, trying to process what he just said. I'm sorry, what story are you referring to? The screenshots from your family group chat that have been circulating on Twitter and Facebook, your brother's accusations, and your response with the medical documentation. It's become a pretty significant conversation starter in the veteran community. My heart sank. What had started as a private family argument had somehow made its way into public discourse. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your interest, but I didn't authorize anyone to share those messages publicly. I understand, ma'am, and I want to be respectful of your privacy, but the conversation this has started about burden of proof for veterans is really important. Would you consider speaking with us about the broader issues? I declined politely and hung up, but the phone rang again within minutes. This time it was a reporter from Military Times, then someone from a veteran advocacy blog, then a producer from a morning talk show. By 9 a.m., I'd received 16 interview requests. That's when I realized the scope of what was happening. I opened social media for the first time since posting my documentation and felt my stomach drop. #ProveYourService was the number 3 trending topic on Twitter. The hashtag was filled with thousands of posts from veterans sharing their own stories of having their service questioned by family members, employers, or strangers.
My story, the disabled veteran forced to show her shrapnel x-rays to prove her service to her own brother, became the centerpiece of a national conversation about stolen valor accusations, veteran skepticism, and the burden of proof that legitimate veterans sometimes face.
But the most viral post came from someone I'd never heard of. Master Sergeant retired David Chen, a veteran influencer with over 200,000 followers across platforms. He'd posted a video response that already had 400,000 views in less than 12 hours. "I've been in the military for 22 years," he said, looking directly into the camera. "I've seen combat, I've lost friends, I've been wounded, and I've helped other wounded warriors transition to civilian life. But I have never, in my entire career, seen anything as disgusting as what happened to this Purple Heart recipient." He held up a printout of Tyler's messages. This woman's own brother accused her of stolen valor in front of her entire family. A Purple Heart recipient, someone who has 43 pieces of shrapnel in her body from an IED explosion, someone who lost 2 soldiers under her command and carries that burden every day. His voice rose with each sentence. "Do you know how hard it is to earn a Purple Heart? You have to be wounded by enemy action. You have to bleed for your country. You have to survive something that could have killed you. And this man, her own brother, looked at his sister's sacrifice and called it fake." The video showed Tyler's accusation, then cut to several of my X-ray images. "These are not fake injuries. This is not performance art. This is what happens when an IED detonates under your vehicle. This is what real veterans carry in their bodies for the rest of their lives." Master Sergeant Chen's voice became deadly serious. "To Tyler Holloway, if you're watching this, you owe your sister the biggest apology in the history of apologies. But more than that, you owe an apology to every veteran who has ever been questioned, doubted, or dismissed by people who think they know better." The video ended with him holding up his own Purple Heart. "I earned this in Afghanistan in 2009. I shouldn't have to prove that to anyone, and neither should she. But if anyone wants to question my service, I invite you to look up my record. It's all there, just like hers is. The difference is, my own family never forced me to prove it." The video was shared 50,000 times in the first day. Meanwhile, Tyler was facing a very different kind of attention. Someone had identified him from the family photos I'd included in my documentation. His full name, his workplace, Holloway and Associates accounting in Rosemount Valley, and his social media profiles were being shared in veteran groups with warnings like, "This is the man who accused his Purple Heart sister of stolen valor." His business Facebook page was flooded with 1-star reviews from veterans and military families. "Would never trust my finances to someone who can't even trust his own sister's military service. If he'll lie about his sister being a veteran, what else will he lie about? Any man who accuses a Purple Heart recipient of stolen valor doesn't deserve civilian business. Called his disabled veteran sister a fake. 0 stars, 0 integrity." The reviews kept coming, hundreds of them. His business rating dropped from 4.8 stars to 1.2 stars in less than 24 hours. Tyler called me Thursday afternoon, panic clear in his voice. "Vanessa, you have to help me. This is out of control." "What is out of control, Tyler?" "These reviews, these people calling my business, the messages I'm getting online. Someone posted my address on a veteran Facebook group." I felt a moment of concern. I hadn't wanted this to escalate to harassment or threats. "Tyler, I didn't share anything publicly. I only responded in our family group chat." "Well, someone shared it, and now I'm getting death threats." "Are you getting actual death threats? Or are you getting angry messages from veterans who are upset that you accused your sister of stolen valor?" A pause. They're really angry messages about my character, about what kind of person accuses their sister of being a fake veteran. "And what kind of person does that, Tyler?" Another pause, longer this time. "Vanessa, I made a mistake. I was wrong about everything. But this has gone too far. My business is being destroyed." "Your business is being destroyed because hundreds of veterans are sharing their opinion about your character. What did you expect would happen when you accused a Purple Heart recipient of stolen valor? I didn't think anyone else would find out. There it was, the truth. Tyler wasn't sorry about what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught doing it publicly. So you're comfortable accusing me of stolen valor as long as it stays in the family? That's not... I didn't mean... Tyler, let me ask you something. After seeing my x-rays, my medical records, my Purple Heart citation, my discharge papers, after seeing 43 pieces of shrapnel embedded in my body, do you still think I'm a fake veteran? Silence. Do you still think I made up my injuries for attention? More silence. Do you still think I'm milking the system for benefits? No. No, I can see that you're really hurt. I can see that you really served. Then why did you accuse me of being fake? Because I didn't understand. I didn't know it was that bad. I thought maybe you were just playing up some minor injuries for sympathy. Minor injuries, Tyler? I almost died. 2 of my soldiers did die. I spent months learning to walk again. I have PTSD from watching my soldiers get killed. I need a service dog to function independently. What part of that seemed minor to you? I know. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. But Vanessa, they're trying to ruin my business. My family's livelihood is at stake. And my reputation was at stake when you called me a fake veteran in front of 17 family members. My honor was at stake. My entire identity as a veteran was at stake. But you didn't care about that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can you post something asking people to stop?
I considered his request. The harassment was concerning, even if it was born from justified outrage. But I also recognized that Tyler was experiencing consequences for his actions in a way he never had before. Tyler, I'll ask people not to harass you or threaten you, but I won't ask them to stop expressing their opinions about what you did. That's not enough. They're destroying my reputation. You destroyed your reputation when you accused your disabled veteran sister of stolen valor. I'm not responsible for cleaning up the mess you made. He hung up without saying goodbye. But the damage was already spreading beyond social media reviews. The Rosemount Valley Chamber of Commerce issued a statement distancing themselves from Tyler's business after several veteran-owned businesses threatened to leave the organization if they continued to associate with someone who had publicly attacked a Purple Heart recipient. The American Legion Post 247, where our father had been a member for 20 years, issued their own statement. We do not condone accusations of stolen valor against legitimate veterans, especially when made without evidence and directed at Purple Heart recipients. Such behavior is antithetical to our values of honoring and supporting those who have served. 3 major clients canceled their contracts with Holloway and Associates within 48 hours. One of them, Riverside Manufacturing, issued a public statement. We cannot in good conscience continue our business relationship with someone who has publicly questioned the service and sacrifice of wounded veterans. Local media picked up the story next. The Rosemount Valley Tribune ran a front-page article, Local Businessman Accused of Questioning Sister's Military Service. The article included quotes from several local veterans who expressed shock and disappointment at Tyler's behavior. Then came the national attention. CNN ran a segment on stolen valor accusations during their evening news, using our story as a case study in how false accusations harm real veterans. They interviewed Master Sergeant Chen about the broader implications of questioning veteran service without evidence. Fox News brought on a panel of military experts to discuss the psychological impact of being accused of stolen valor by family members. MSNBC ran a story about the viral response to Tyler's accusations, focusing on how the veteran community had rallied to support me and condemn his behavior. But the most impactful coverage came from an unexpected source: 60 Minutes. A producer called me Friday morning with a proposition. Miss Holloway, we'd like to do a segment on stolen valor accusations, both real cases and false accusations like what happened to you. We think your story illustrates important issues about how we treat veterans and how accusations like this can be weaponized. I agreed to participate, but only if they focused on the broader issues rather than just our family drama. The interview was scheduled for the following week, but news of the upcoming segment leaked immediately. Local news stations began running stories about the Purple Heart recipient who will appear on 60 Minutes to discuss being accused of stolen valor by her brother. Tyler called me again that evening, this time sobbing. Vanessa, they're going to destroy me. 60 Minutes? Really? You're going to humiliate me on national television? Tyler, I'm going to talk about stolen valor accusations and their impact on veterans. This isn't about humiliating you, it's about educating people. That's the same thing. Everyone will know it was me. Everyone already knows it was you. Your name and business have been in the news for 3 days. I lost another client today, and Jennifer is talking about separation. That stopped me short. Tyler, I'm sorry about Jennifer. I never wanted this to affect your marriage. She says she can't respect a man who would attack his own sister like that. She says she doesn't know who I really am. I felt a pang of sympathy for Jennifer, who was clearly as shocked about Tyler's behavior as everyone else. Maybe you should focus on showing her who you really are, instead of worrying about what other people think. How can I do that when my reputation is destroyed, when everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster? Tyler, your reputation isn't destroyed because people found out about your accusations. Your reputation is destroyed because you made those accusations in the first place. But I apologized. You apologized because you got caught and faced consequences, not because you understood why what you did was wrong. That's not true. Then explain to me why you thought I was faking my service. Silence. Explain to me why you spent months questioning my disabilities to other people. More silence. Explain to me why, even after seeing my x-rays and medical records, your first response was to complain that I was making a big deal out of being called a fake veteran. I don't know. I thought maybe you were getting attention and benefits you didn't deserve. Based on what evidence? I don't know. I don't know. And that was the real problem. Tyler had made serious accusations against my character and my service based on nothing more than his own suspicions and resentment. He had no evidence, no proof, no legitimate reason to doubt my service. He simply decided that I was somehow deceiving our family and had spent months building a case against me in his own mind. When forced to confront the reality of my service and injuries, he couldn't explain his reasoning because there was no reasoning. There was only jealousy, ignorance, and a fundamental lack of respect for my choices and sacrifices. Tyler, the reason people are so angry with you isn't just because you accused me of stolen valor. It's because you did it without any evidence, without any consideration for what that accusation means to a veteran, and without any understanding of the damage such accusations can cause. I know that now. Do you? Because 3 days ago you were still trying to minimize what you'd done. You called my response a big deal and complained that things had gotten out of hand. That doesn't sound like someone who understands the gravity of accusing a Purple Heart recipient of lying about their service.
Tyler, stolen valor accusations destroy veterans' reputations, their mental health, their sense of identity. When you accuse a real veteran of being fake, you're not just questioning their service, You're attacking their entire sense of self-worth. I didn't know that. You should have known that. You should have considered the impact of your words before you said them. You should have asked yourself what evidence you had before making such a serious accusation. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I'm really, truly sorry. I believe you're sorry about the consequences. I'm not sure you're sorry about the action. The line went quiet for a long time. What do I do now? He finally asked. You learn from this. You educate yourself about military service and veteran issues. You think carefully before making accusations about anyone's character, and you accept that some mistakes have permanent consequences. Are you ever going to forgive me? I considered the question carefully. Tyler, forgiveness isn't something you can earn by asking for it. It's something that happens when someone demonstrates genuine understanding of what they've done wrong and makes real changes to prevent it from happening again. I understand what I did wrong. Do you? Because yesterday you were still focused on the consequences you're facing rather than the harm you caused me. You called me asking for help with your business reviews, not to make sure I was okay after being accused of stolen valor by my own brother. Another long pause. You're right. I'm sorry. Are you okay? How are you handling all this attention? It was a start. Not much of one, but a start. I'm managing. It's been difficult having such a personal family matter become public, but I'm grateful for the support from the veteran community. I'm sorry I put you in that position. Tyler, the veteran community is rallying around me because they understand what stolen valor accusations do to real veterans. They've seen the damage caused by false accusations, and they won't tolerate it. What happened to me happens to other veterans too, and they're using my story to start conversations about how we can prevent it. So something good is coming from this? Something good is coming from how the veteran community responded to what you did. The response is positive. Your actions were not. I could hear him crying on the other end of the line. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Tyler. You can only learn from it and do better going forward. Will you still do the 60 Minutes interview? Yes, because this story is bigger than our family now. It's about how we treat veterans, how we handle accusations of stolen valor, and how we can protect legitimate veterans from false accusations. Even if it makes things worse for me? Tyler, things are worse for you because of choices you made. I'm not responsible for protecting you from the consequences of your actions anymore. That conversation was the last time Tyler and I spoke before the 60 Minutes segment aired. But it wasn't the last time our story made news. Because while Tyler was dealing with the fallout from his accusations, something else was happening that would transform my personal ordeal into a national movement for veteran support and protection. The veteran community hadn't just rallied around me, they'd organized around the issues my story represented. And they were about to use my experience to create lasting change that would protect other veterans from facing what I had. Tyler had wanted to expose me as a fraud. Instead, he had inspired a movement to protect real veterans from false accusations. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that exceeds anything we could plan or imagine. The 60 Minutes crew arrived at my apartment in Millbrook Heights on a Tuesday morning, transforming my quiet living room into a professional television studio within 2 hours. Cameras, lights, sound equipment, and a small army of producers and technicians working with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of experience telling important stories. Anderson Cooper sat across from me in my own living room, but the familiar space felt different under the bright lights. Rex lay at my feet, calm and alert, sensing the significance of the moment even if he didn't understand the cameras. Anderson, Miss Holloway, you served your country honorably, were wounded in combat and received the Purple Heart. Can you tell us what it felt like when your own brother accused you of stolen valor? I had practiced this moment, but sitting under those lights, knowing that millions of people would hear my answer, the weight of it felt enormous. Anderson,
The accusation itself was devastating, but what hurt most was realizing that my brother had been questioning my service for months, building a case against me in his mind without ever asking me directly about his concerns. He chose to believe that I was capable of dishonoring every veteran who was actually served, rather than simply asking me to explain things he didn't understand. You shared very personal medical documentation to prove your service. That must have been difficult. I nodded, glancing at the shadow box on my wall containing my Purple Heart. Those x-rays, those medical records, they represent the most painful period of my life. The explosion that created those injuries killed 2 of my soldiers. I've never shared those images publicly because they're not just proof of my injuries, they're reminders of the day I lost people under my command. Anderson leaned forward slightly. But you felt compelled to share them. I realized that Tyler's accusation wasn't just about me. It was about the burden of proof that veterans face when our service is questioned. Most veterans never have to display their medical records to prove their service to their families. I shouldn't have had to either. The interview continued for over an hour, covering the broader implications of stolen valor accusations, the psychological impact on legitimate veterans, and the importance of supporting rather than suspecting those who have served.
But the most powerful moment came when Anderson asked about the response from the veteran community. The reaction to your story has been unprecedented. Veterans across the country have shared similar experiences. What does that tell you? It tells me that what happened to me isn't unique. There are veterans all over this country who have been questioned, doubted, or dismissed by people who should support them. Family members who think they know better than military doctors. Employers who suspect that disability claims are exaggerated. Strangers who assume that young veterans or female veterans couldn't possibly have seen real combat. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But it also tells me that the veteran community won't tolerate attacks on legitimate service members. They've rallied around me not because my story is special, but because they recognize it. They've lived variations of it themselves. Anderson asked about Tyler, about forgiveness, about family healing. My brother made his accusations publicly, in front of 17 family members. He questioned not just my service, but my character, my integrity, my honesty about the most defining experience of my adult life. That's not something you recover from with a simple apology. Do you think he understands the gravity of what he did? I considered the question carefully. I think Tyler understands the consequences he's facing. I'm not sure he fully understands the harm he caused me, or the broader message his accusations sent about how we treat veterans in this country. The interview aired the following Sunday night. 12 million viewers watched the segment, making it one of the most viewed 60 Minutes pieces of the year. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang constantly with interview requests from major networks, podcasts, veteran organizations, and advocacy groups. But more importantly, it rang with calls from veterans who wanted to share their own stories of being questioned, doubted, or dismissed. Miss Holloway, my own mother asked me if I was really disabled because I don't look injured, one caller told me. My employer kept questioning my PTSD diagnosis because I seemed fine at work, shared another. My ex-husband accused me of faking my military sexual trauma to get attention during our divorce, said a female veteran whose voice broke as she spoke. Each conversation confirmed what I'd suspected. Tyler's accusation was part of a larger pattern of skepticism toward veterans that went far beyond family dynamics. Within a week of the broadcast, something remarkable began to happen. Veterans organizations across the country started implementing what they called the Holloway Protocol, educational programs designed to help civilian family members, employers, and community members better understand military service, combat injuries, and veteran issues. The American Legion developed a comprehensive guide for families of veterans, explaining invisible wounds like PTSD and traumatic brain injury, the reality of military medical evaluations, and the significance of military awards and decorations.
The veterans of foreign wars created a workplace education program for employers, helping them understand veteran disabilities, accommodate service-connected conditions, and recognize the signs of someone struggling with transition issues. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America launched a social media campaign called Believe Veterans, encouraging supporters to trust veterans' accounts of their service and experiences rather than approaching them with suspicion. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source: the Department of Veterans Affairs. Secretary of Veterans Affairs Catherine Walsh called me personally 3 weeks after the 60-minute segment aired. Ms. Holloway, your story has highlighted some serious gaps in how we support veterans who face skepticism about their service. We'd like to work with you to develop new resources and protocols. The result was the Veterans Advocacy and Education Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to protect veterans from false stolen valor accusations while also educating the public about legitimate military service. The initiative included several key components: a rapid response team for veterans facing stolen valor accusations, providing immediate support and documentation assistance; educational resources for families, employers, and communities about military service, veteran benefits, and the reality of combat injuries; a verification system that allowed veterans to quickly and privately prove their service to employers, landlords, or others who require documentation without having to share sensitive medical information; legal support for veterans whose reputations had been damaged by false accusations; most importantly, a national awareness campaign about the harm caused by questioning veterans' service without evidence. I was invited to serve on the advisory board for the initiative, working alongside other veterans, military advocates, and policy experts to develop programs that would protect future veterans from experiencing what I had experienced. 6 months after Tyler's accusations, I found myself testifying before a congressional subcommittee about the need for better veteran support and protection. "Congresswoman Martinez," I said, addressing the subcommittee chair, "when we send young men and women to war, we promise them that their service will be honored and respected when they return. When family members, employers, or community members question their service without evidence, we break that promise." I shared statistics that had been gathered through the initiative. Nearly 40% of veterans had experienced some form of skepticism about their service or disabilities from people who should have been supportive. Female veterans and younger veterans faced the highest rates of questioning. The solution isn't just to punish those who make false accusations. The solution is to educate civilians about military service, provide better support for veterans who face skepticism, and create systems that protect veterans' privacy while allowing them to verify their service when necessary. The testimony led to the Veterans Protection and Education Act, bipartisan legislation that funded veteran advocacy programs, expanded educational resources, and created legal protections for veterans facing false stolen valor accusations. The bill passed unanimously in both chambers and was signed into law 6 months later. At the signing ceremony, President Harrison invited me to stand behind her as she signed the legislation. This bill exists because Vanessa Holloway had the courage to share her story. When her own brother questioned her service, she responded not with anger, but with evidence, not with revenge, but with education. Her example has protected countless other veterans from facing similar accusations.
As I stood in the Oval Office, watching the president sign legislation that would protect future generations of veterans, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. Tyler's accusations had been intended to diminish me, to question my integrity and my service. Instead, they had led to national conversations, policy changes, and protections that would benefit veterans for decades to come. After the ceremony, I returned to Millbrook Heights to find my apartment filled with letters, emails, and messages from veterans across the country. "Thank you for turning your pain into protection for the rest of us," one veteran wrote. "Because of your courage, my daughter won't have to prove her service the way you did," said another. "You took the worst moment of your veteran experience and made it into the best thing that could happen for veteran advocacy," shared a Gold Star mother. But perhaps the most meaningful message came from an unexpected source. Tyler had written me a letter. Not a text, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter delivered through the mail. "Vanessa,
I've been in therapy for 6 months, trying to understand why I did what I did to you. Dr. Peterson says I was dealing with my own feelings of inadequacy by trying to diminish your achievements. She says I was threatened by your courage and service because it highlighted my own lack of purpose. I don't know if that's true, but I know what I did was unforgivable. I've been following the work you've been doing, the legislation, the veteran advocacy programs. I see how you've turned my cruelty into something that helps other veterans. I don't understand how someone can be that strong, that generous. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I destroyed our relationship and hurt you in ways I'm only beginning to understand. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I should have been proud of you from the beginning. Proud when you enlisted. Proud when you deployed. Proud when you served with honor. Proud when you survived injuries that would have broken other people. Instead, I was small and jealous and cruel. I'm trying to be better. I'm working with a veteran support organization here in Florida doing administrative work, trying to give back in some tiny way for the harm I caused. Jennifer and I are divorced now. She said she couldn't respect a man who would attack his own sister's honor. She was right. I've lost my business, my reputation, my marriage, most of my friends. Those are the consequences of my choices, and I accept them. What I can't accept is knowing that I hurt my sister, who nearly died serving her country, who lost soldiers under her command, who carries 43 pieces of shrapnel in her body as proof of her sacrifice. You didn't deserve what I did to you. No veteran deserves that. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I know it's not enough, but it's all I have. Your brother, Tyler. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in my living room with Rex at my feet, processing emotions I wasn't sure I was ready to feel. Tyler had lost everything. His business, his marriage, his reputation, his standing in the community. He'd been forced to start over in a new state with a new identity, carrying the weight of what he'd done to his own sister. Part of me felt satisfaction that he'd faced real consequences for his actions. Part of me felt sadness for the brother I'd once loved who had destroyed himself through his own cruelty and ignorance. But mostly, I felt closure. Tyler's letter showed genuine understanding of what he'd done and why it was wrong. Not just regret about the consequences he'd faced, but actual comprehension of the harm he had caused me and the broader message his accusations had sent about how we treat veterans. I wrote him back. Not a long letter, but an honest one. Tyler, thank you for your letter. I can see that you've done real work to understand what happened and why. I accept your apology, not because what you did was acceptable, but because I can see that you truly understand the gravity of your actions now. I hope your work with veteran organizations helps you find the purpose and meaning that you are missing when you chose to attack my service. We may never have the relationship we once had, but I wish you well in your efforts to make amends and move forward. Vanessa. 6 months later, I received another letter from Tyler. This one included a newspaper clipping from his new hometown in Florida. The headline read, "Local Volunteer Coordinator Helps Veterans Navigate Benefits System." The article featured Tyler working at a veteran service organization, helping disabled veterans apply for benefits, navigate the VA system, and access resources for housing, employment, and healthcare. I made terrible mistakes in how I treated veterans in the past, Tyler was quoted as saying in the article. Now I'm trying to spend the rest of my life making up for those mistakes by actually helping instead of hurting. The article mentioned that Tyler had helped process over 200 benefit applications in his first year, resulting in millions of dollars in benefits for veterans who had been struggling to navigate the system alone. It wasn't redemption. What Tyler had done to me couldn't be undone or fully forgiven. But it was growth, change, and genuine effort to repair some of the harm he had caused. 2 years after that first family group chat, I was invited to speak at the National Veterans Day ceremony in Washington, D.C. Standing at the podium, looking out at thousands of veterans, military families, and civilian supporters, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all together.
2 years ago, I told the crowd, my own brother accused me of stolen valor. He forced me to display my medical records, my x-rays, my most private documentation of military service, just to prove to my family that I was a real veteran. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many of them knew the story, but hearing it in person, at this venue, carried special weight. That accusation was intended to diminish me, to question my integrity and my service. Instead, it started a national conversation about how we treat veterans. It led to legislation protecting veterans from false accusations. It created educational programs that help civilians better understand military service. It resulted in support systems for veterans facing skepticism about their service or disabilities. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. My brother's cruelty became the catalyst for kindness. His ignorance became the foundation for education. His attack on my service became protection for yours. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't finished. To every veteran listening today, your service matters. Your sacrifices are real. Your wounds, visible and invisible, are valid. And if anyone ever questions your service without evidence, know that you have an entire community ready to stand with you. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the Purple Heart that I now carried with me to speaking engagements. This medal represents being wounded in service to my country, but more than that, it represents the price of freedom and the courage of those who pay it. No veteran should have to prove their worthiness to wear it. No veteran should have to justify their service to people who've never served. I held the Purple Heart up for everyone to see. This belongs to all of us. Every veteran who has served honorably, every family member who has supported that service, every citizen who understands the sacrifice it represents. As I left the podium, veterans approached me with their own stories, their own Purple Hearts, their own experiences of having their service questioned and validated. But the most meaningful encounter came from an unexpected source, a young woman in Army dress blues. "Ma'am, I'm Specialist Rodriguez. I just wanted to thank you." "For what, Specialist?" "My family has been questioning whether I should stay in the Army. They keep asking if I'm sure this is what I want to do, if I'm really cut out for military service. After seeing your story, they understand that doubting my choices is the same as doubting my ability to serve my country." She smiled, a mixture of gratitude and determination on her face. "They're proud of me now instead of worried about me, and if they ever forget, I'll show them your 60 Minutes interview." As I drove home to Millbrook Heights that evening, Rex sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat, I realized that Tyler's accusations had accomplished something neither of us could have anticipated. They had transformed me from someone defending her own honor to someone protecting all veterans' honor. They had changed me from a private citizen managing my own disabilities to a public advocate ensuring that other veterans wouldn't face what I had faced. They had evolved me from a woman hurt by her brother's cruelty to a leader using that pain to create lasting change. Tyler had called me a fake veteran, intending to destroy my reputation and diminish my service. Instead, he had revealed the real veteran I was meant to become, not just someone who had served her country in combat, but someone who would spend the rest of her life serving veterans in ways that combat never could have taught me. Sometimes our greatest wounds become our most powerful weapons for healing others. Sometimes our deepest betrayals become our strongest platforms for protecting others. Sometimes the people who try to break us end up making us unbreakable. Tyler had given me the fight of my life. I had won it not just for myself, but for every veteran who would come after me. And that victory would last long after the pain of his accusations had faded into memory.